What's up, guys? Today I'm balding. What's up, guys? It's Tom with Verus Engineering, and today we're going to be going over the AOS install for the GR86. Let's get into it.
The Verus Engineering Air Oil Separator features a 3-stage filtration system for your PCV system. First and foremost, it features 4 desiccant filters, which filter down particles down to the 5-micron size. So this wicks the oil and the water out of the air flow.
Okay, so I'll give you a little overview of where we're going. We are going to be working towards the back of the engine bay here. We're going to have to remove the battery. The AOS will sit somewhere around here. And all of our hose connections are going to be back down here. It's a little dark right now, but during the install, we'll have that all nice and lit up for you guys. Here is step 1. Remove the engine cover. And here is the PCV hose that we will actually end up be disconnecting in order to route the AOS in between. So now the battery's out of the way, we're going to start to bolt down the AOS mounting bracket, and we're going to bring it in a little bit closer here, and I'll show you exactly what we're going to do for that. All right, so we got the battery removed. I forgot to mention a little bit earlier in the last clip, there is a clip here on the main battery harness. You can release this clip from the back side of this bracket, and it'll make moving the positive cable around a lot easier. That way, when you go to remove the battery out of the car, you don't have to fight it like I just did on camera. So the big thing here is we're gonna mount up the AOS bracket, and we're gonna focus on this hole and this slot. Okay, so the slot, this is gonna be difficult to see, goes behind this harness bracket here. There's a, hard to tell, but it's a 10mm flange nut. We're gonna loosen that. We're not gonna take it out all the way, but loosen it and pull the harness away from the firewall just a hair so we can slip the bracket behind it. Then there is a 10mm nut or bolt down here. We're gonna take that out, unclip this brake line to help you get to the bolt. You will need to undo that 10mm there as well. And this whole bracket, if you will come out, and we will bolt the AOS bracket leg, if you will, underneath the white bracket there. All right, here's a better shot of the nut for the harness against the firewall. Hopefully, if I can get to focus. Bear with me, it's a bit tough to get back here. So we loosened that up and we slipped the AOS bracket behind it so that we could tighten that down. Kind of see that here. Excuse all the lights. Kind of dark back in the back of the engine bay here. We used a 16mm button head cap screw down there with an 18mm washer. Tighten them both up. Now we've got the AOS bracket in place. We're gonna go ahead and start playing with all of the hoses we need to move. Real quick on our AOS assembly, basically we're going to reserve these 2 barbs or ports for the PCV side of things, and we're going to reserve these 2 for the engine breather. Essentially, we're going to transfer the PCV valve from the engine block, remove it, put it into the AOS here, and we're going to use this side here for the routing back into the intake manifold. We'll get to these after we finish that, but for now, we'll go ahead and get into taking off the hoses for the PCV and transferring the PCV valve into the AOS. Okay, so here's what I was talking about earlier. This is the big hose. This is the 5/8 hose that goes down to the PCV valve, down there. It's gonna be hard to focus, but you follow this hose routing up to the top of the manifold. There are no clamps on this, so I'm gonna show you right now how easy it is to remove. Just like that. And we're gonna take this hose and basically get rid of it. You can see how much oil is already in here, and this car's only got maybe 1,500 miles. So that's that. We're going to replace the barb. What are you doing, camera? The hose barb or PCV valve in the block with a hose barb adapter and mount up the PC or the AOS right now. Okay, so off camera, I went ahead and swapped over the PCV fittings. We put the PCV valve from the engine onto the AOS, and we put the threaded or the NPT adapter on into the engine block, excuse me. And basically they're taper threads, so we don't want to tighten them down until the threads are gone. We're just going to tighten them down until it starts to get pretty tight. We also want to make sure we use a thread sealer. We prefer the liquid type, but basically, again, this is what you should end up having with the AOS. With both those fittings bolted in, we're going to bolt the AOS assembly up to the bracket and start running the hoses for the AOS itself for the PCV side of things. Again, these two fittings here. Since we are actually installing the coolant add-on that we offer as well, instead of just bolting this AOS up directly to the bracket right now, which you would do normally if you didn't have the coolant add-on kit, we're actually going to go ahead and install the coolant add-on kit to the AOS. Basically, you'll get this cooling plate adapter. It'll take two banjo fittings that will go here and here. We're going to bolt this up to the back of the AOS body just like that. It features an O-ring on the back to seal off the coolant. You want to make sure this O-ring is seated correctly within the groove. Make sure it doesn't pop out or anything like that when you go to tighten it down. For this particular install, we're to mount it up to the bracket itself. It's not going to utilize all the bolt holes, so we will be able to bolt this up to the AOS without having the O-ring be an issue later on. Once we bolt them all up, we'll be able to just snug up the banjo fittings. We're not going to tighten them up just yet. We just want to snug them up so that we can get the hose routing for the coolant correct. And once we have the hose routing done, we'll go for final tightening. Okay, I've got the coolant plate for the coolant add-on bolted up to the AOS. Now we're going to bolt this up to the bracket using your 16mm button head cap screws and stainless steel washers. There will be 3 of them that you'll need if you are not installing the coolant add-on kit. If you are installing the coolant add-on kit, the bracket will be sandwiching the coolant plate, and because of that, you will actually need 7 bolts to bolt this up completely. So I'm going to finish up bolting this to the mounting bracket. So we're going to need 2 lengths of hose. One is going to be of the 5/8 variety. The other is going to be of the 1/2 inch variety. So your 1/2 inch hose, you're going to want to cut to 16 inches. And the 5/8 hose, you're going to want it to be around 22 inches. Let's start with the 5/8 hose. You can see that they're pretty different in terms of size. So obviously the 5/8 hose is going to go from your PCV into the manifold. You're just going to run it from here straight to here. The hose, because of the size, is going to want to dip down just a hair into here and then kind of come back up into the manifold fitting. The 1/2 inch section of hose is going to go to the block PCV adapter fitting that we installed earlier. That is going to be straight down from here. And we'll do that right now, actually. Just kind of, hopefully, if I'm lucky, got it. Nice, I'm the coolest. So we're gonna connect that to the block adapter fitting, and we're gonna go straight to the end here. 5/8 hose, we're gonna go to the PCV valve and kind of come down a little bit and into the intake manifold, just like that. And there you have it. That is the PCV side of the AOS is done. So, jazz hands. So, we're gonna go through the engine block breather side of things now. Once I'm done with showing you guys that. I'm gonna run through all of the hose routings with a nice close-up of everything, and then we'll go over how to run the drain back kit. And we're back, but we're on this side now. So this side, the engine block breather side, for the last two fittings on the AOS are gonna be a little bit more tricky. I'm not gonna lie, getting the hose off where the block breather fitting that goes here is just going to be a pain. There's really no way around it. And yeah, sorry. So the best way to do it is with a set of 45-degree needle nose pliers. You're gonna need longer ones. You're gonna have to basically get down in here like this, pull the clamp off, and then pull the hose off as well. Take it off completely, both sides, the block breather side and the intake tube side. Set it aside, we don't need that anymore. Then I've already done this off camera because it's a little bit difficult to show while holding the camera. But basically I've taken a length of 1/2-inch hose that I cut to 32 inches. I've routed it back here along the hard line for the brake booster. And I've routed it underneath the intake manifold into the block breather fitting beneath the AC compressor. So that's connected. We have this end here that will connect in a minute, but basically that is the block breather side that's gonna go to the AOS. And now I'm gonna move to the other side and show you what's going on with the intake tube. The intake tube is gonna need a hose that's about 25 inches long, 1/2-inch diameter for both of these. We're gonna do something similar here, but just on this side. We're going to route the hose under the intake manifold. Just like this. So you see I've got one end here and one end here. And we're gonna plug that in to the intake tube side. And we are going to run the intake tube side to the end of the AOS. And we're gonna grab the hose from the block breather side and we're gonna run that into the last remaining fitting, just like that. So now we've got all the hoses connected on the car. Basically now it's pretty much up to you to figure out how you want to route everything and zip tie them in place. Whatever you want to do in terms of making everything look pretty. But as far as functionality, this is the install that is done. We are now going to go into installing the coolant add-on kit, which we prepared for earlier with the coolant plate sandwiched between the AOS mount. And we're going to go through the drain back kit. We're installing the AOS drain back for the GR86. We have a knurled fitting at the bottom of the AOS. It will look like this. Okay. It is a plug currently. When you get the kit, you're going to have to remove it and transfer an O-ring onto the new drain back fitting kit. This one goes through, thus draining back. This is the O-ring that I had transferred over from the previous plug. Once you have the O-ring transferred over, you'll get your -6 O-ring boss fitting that goes to a 1/2-inch barb. You will thread them together, just like that. Tighten them down by hand. And we're gonna put this into the AOS. And because it is a knurled fitting, it's meant to be tightened by hand. So just snug it up, the O-ring will seal it as long as you just get it tight with your fingers. So this guy, save for later if you decide to ever remove the kit. And then you will have had, if you had the AOS installed, this hose here going to the block will have been about 16 inches. If you, for some reason, don't have that hose, then you're gonna want a section of 13.5 inch in length, 1/2-inch hose, and another small section of 2.5 inch length, 1/2 inch hose. If you already have the AOS, just cut it right there and it ends up being perfect. You're gonna want to get an additional length of hose that should measure approximately 11.5 inches. Again, that's 1/2 inch diameter hose. You'll be supplied with a Y fitting. Connect all three to the Y, just like this. You'll have the 2.5 inch section on the single piece of the Y, and then you'll have the longer pieces on the other two sections of the Y fitting. This part's going to be fairly simple. We're gonna put this into the block, the 2.5 inch piece. The shorter piece that we cut is gonna go into the bottom of the AOS down here for the actual drain back. And of course, the 13.5 inch piece is going to be the section that we cut basically in half, or not in half, but separated into two pieces that was originally on the AOS. So I'm gonna basically install this assembled piece now. What I like to do is route the shorter leg underneath the main connector. Take the small leg and push it onto the hose barb adapter that we installed into the engine block. Take your 13.5 inch hose, run it underneath the hard line for the master cylinder, plug it back in to the AOS where it was. Here is the drain. You're gonna wanna route it under the main harness connector on the back side of the brake booster hose and push it up onto the drain bag fitting. Like that. Okay, we've got the line going down to the Y fitting. Down here, try and get some light on that. So there is the Y right there. We've got the 2.5 inch leg of hose going into the block adapter fitting. And we've got this upper hose here, you know, coming up into the AOS, and then the bottom section of hose goes under that main connector there. And here we go. Is gonna end up here and run all the way up to, there you go, the bottom of the AOS. And there is your drain back. All right, we're gonna go ahead and install the Coolant Add-On Kit for the AOS. We've got the banjo fittings loosely installed. They are snugged up just a little bit so they don't move around too much, but I do have them pointed down because I think that that's how I want the hoses routed. So we're gonna run the hoses from there, and basically we're going to tap the throttle body right here. So we're gonna remove that hose completely that I'm showing you right now after we get this intake tube off. And we're gonna clamp the lines while we do that so that none of the coolant leaks out. I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and I'll show you guys what I mean by removing the line and tapping the coolant. All right, so off camera, I removed the intake tube. Then we're going to pinch off the hose that is directly under the throttle body opening. And basically we're gonna remove this hose here. Like I said before, if you trace this hose back to the rear, there's another leg of hardline, goes to another section of hose. You want to clamp that section of hose back there and disconnect this hose at the throttle body and the section of hardline that starts in the back. Once you have that done, you want to remove the hose totally from the car. And what we're going to do is run a length of hose from this barb to one of the fittings on the back of the AOS and the hardline in the back of the engine to the other fitting on the back of the AOS. All right, so I went ahead and cut the 5/16 hose that we need to get the cooling mod hooked up to the AOS. We have a 21 inch piece of hose. That 21-inch piece of hose is going to go from the AOS to the hard line or coolant pipe, whatever you want to call it, on the car that we disconnected the one side of the hose from. It's going to go from there to one of the banjos. Next is a 26-inch piece of hose, and that 26-inch piece of hose is going to go from this barb on the throttle body itself back to the AOS. I'm going to go ahead and hook these up now. Of course, we supply hose clamps as well. We're going to put hose clamps on all of the fittings, and I'm going to do that. And boom, hoses are routed. All we need to do is tighten the clamps on the throttle body side and the coolant pipe side. And I'll do that real quick, and then we'll show you the little tip I have for tightening everything up on the AOS. All right, so we're back here again. All right, we got one coolant hose, two coolant hose. Obviously, they're gonna go to their respective sides. So earlier I said not to tighten down the banjos. The reason for that is simply because of how thick the hose is. Once you get the banjos tightened down and they're as far as I can get, you know, this way against the cooling plate, you basically don't have enough clearance for the hose and the clamp to slide up onto the barb. And so because of that, we want to make sure that these are loose. We're going to slide this onto the barb, tighten the clamp, and then we're going to torque the banjos separately. And again, the banjos are pointed straight down. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And when I come back, we'll have a fully hooked up coolant mod. Okay, once you're done tightening everything up, is something like this is what you're looking for. And there we go. We're back to hooking everything back up. We're going to remove the clamps on the coolant lines, put the hoses back on the AOS, and we'll be good to go. Okay guys, that's going to wrap it up for the AOS install on the GR86. Today we covered the install for the base AOS unit, the Coolant Add-On Kit, as well as the AOS drainback. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, make sure you email us at sales@verus-engineering.com. Also, make sure you check out that install manual that we have. If you have any other questions, it might clarify some things for you. But that's going to wrap it up for me today. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.